Hey guys, what's up? Unrested here, and today is Osoroshii Saturday. I am out doing a little bit of an investigation on a town here known as Tanibusu, also known as Valley of the Ugly, a very non-PC sort of volatile name given to this town after it supposedly had an issue with a chemical spill that affected the inhabitants of this town in a way in which for generations the babies were born with deformities and absolutely disfiguring malformities and all different types of birth attributes, and that was why this town was titled in such a way. It was a nickname given to its neighboring villages, which pretty much didn't want to have to do anything with the town, even though they were in dire need of help, of course, because they were affected by this chemical spill. They were kind of just left to the side, swept under the rug, and not taken care of. Apparently, the inhabitants of the town that originally suffered through this died out over generations. Since then, only a few remaining families remain in this town, so it's almost like a ghost town now. Pretty much like my last investigation is what I've heard is that there's little to no one walking the streets. So I'm gonna go around and check this out, kind of give you the 411 on what I find out about this town, take a look around some of the areas in which I heard certain parts of the story take place, and hopefully gather you some information that just lets you know whether or not this urban legend is based completely on myth or is born from an ounce of truth. Let's go find out. Okay, what's kind of odd already is that we're already on dirt paths, which is pretty rare in Japan as far as little city areas being in the middle of dirt paths. We're going to take a look around here, and I've got a little bit of story about an experiment that went on that first started this whole thing off and brought attention to the fact that there was a chemical spill and people had been affected in this town by these radioactive materials that affected the birth rate, deformities, and malformations in birth thereafter. Right away, the first thing I'm finding quite a bit of is these houses just totally quarantined off, wrapped up, and usually what is used as something to stop debris from falling during building times and refurbishing times of different apartment buildings and businesses. And instead, this has been used to quarantine this area off, which is a bit strange. I guess maybe this house may still be affected in some way. It kind of makes me wonder how I'm affecting my own health by being here. It's strange. And here we are once again, another house quarantined off. Once again, you would think that this was a place being reconstructed, but I kind of look behind the curtains here, and there's definitely nothing being reconstructed here with the house. It's just literally all busted up and uninhabitable. Even if you could refurbish that, I don't think it would be a livable place unless you just completely tore it down and rebuilt. Finding this once again too, a lot of places totally boarded up that you can't see inside. I guess once again for a sense of privacy. And another house totally quarantined off. Huh. Yeah, I'm really kind of worried about the detriment to my health of being here with this many places quarantined off. This is some shoddy stuff. With the ones that we see in my part of town where they do this to kind of center off an area to rebuild upon, usually they use like metal scaffolding and stuff like this. I haven't seen wood-based scaffolding in ages. I'm not quite sure why they wouldn't use the proper materials. Looks like this hasn't even been taken care of in ages. How long has it been since anyone's lived in these parts of the town? So far, I have yet to actually see any life, but I will say one thing I have had happen is I had a sort of distrust or anger placed towards me due to the fact that I was yelled at from one house to get away from this quarantined area. They weren't too happy to have me around. Unfortunately, I did not have the camera on at the time, but if only I had caught that scream on camera, man, they were pissed off. But that's not going to totally stop me from checking out this town. I mean, it's not like I don't have the right to be here, so very well then. Look, it's the first person I've actually seen in this town. You can't see it from here, but that's actually a pretty young person, and they have no hair. And it's like the top of their head is like aging. I feel horrible talking about this up close on camera. With this. This is the area I just got yelled at, and so I'm gonna get out of here now because I'm getting uncomfortable.
Okay, I'm rushing away from there when I come upon just this big clump of human hair laying on the ground. That's pretty nasty. That's a pretty large clump. I mean, maybe, it could be some sort of horse hair or animal hair used to make a wig or something like that, so I shouldn't assume totally that what I'm seeing is human hair, but I mean, how often do you see that large of a clump of human hair in the middle of the street? Again, here we are with the dirt roads. Never seen so many dirt roads in a small town like this. Where is this gonna lead to? Oh, it was here. Looks like it used to be the plot for a house, but now it's just totally covered by tracks of some sort of bulldozer. Just a house totally taken out. Okay, well, maybe they've taken my advice and finally decided to actually take down one of these houses and rebuild from the start. It is good to see a town try to rebuild. I hope that's what they're trying to do.
So you see that? It's actually a young woman over there using a walker to walk. I feel despicable being here talking about this town. But I'm just merely reporting like what I'm seeing. So one of the weirdest stories that comes out of this town, this area that I'm talking about, is the fact that there was actually a story here of how they found out the chemicals that were exposed to the people here were first toxic, and that is because there was a lab experiment where they were mixing these chemicals that they thought possibly had uranium or plutonium in them. And I don't know anything about science. I'm not pretending to have any kind of knowledge of how any of this stuff works. But apparently during one of these mixes of this powder that they were using to use to make an element that was supposed to help break down the way an engine worked for some sort of nuclear device.
Still in Death by Science, let's move on to radiation.
Now, this is the story that made me want to do this whole podcast. This is a fucking rough ass story, and it just shows, and again, no matter what your boss asks you to do while you're working at the nuclear power plant, you're allowed to question it.
Totally.
You're allowed to just think about yourself for a second, just for a second. So
yeah.
What would Homer Simpson do? That's what I was saying.
So this is
this is what happened in the beginning credits of The Simpsons.
It really is.
Dropping radioactive material all over yourself, but we'll see what happens.
So how radiation actually kills you is that unlike other toxins, our bodies don't detox radiation. We can't handle it. The damages radiation causes, it remains once it has been inflicted, or Once it has inflicted its damage, it continues to damage as it reduces the ability of healthy cells to replicate, and it changes healthy cells into free radicals that in turn damage more healthy cells.
That's what the Beatles did to good kids in the 60s.
It's a true domino effect. It starts turning, your entire body just starts turning against you. It is cancer plus. Let's call it that. So the worst nuclear radiation accident in Japan's history, until Fukushima, of course, was at a uranium processing facility and it was not an actual nuclear power plant like 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl or Fukushima. It was a processing plant, which means that they were making the materials that were to go to the power plant eventually.
So they didn't get all the glitz and glamour of working at the actual nuclear power plant.
Right.
Yeah. It's still extremely dangerous.
More dangerous or less dangerous?
I'm not sure.
More dangerous, because you're going to see what happened. Why? Because they're doing it like they're making jam at grandma's fucking farm. Like, this is ridiculous. So basically, they were told to hand mix these uranium solutions into a tank, which was against any sort of approved procedure. And the way they said is that they were doing basically the guy that we're going to talk about, Hisashi Ouchi, which is also a rough name for what happened.
Yeah.
Basically, their jobs were to pour buckets of one solution into this gigantic tank of uranium, and they did it 7 times. What they didn't realize what they were doing, and it's basically they were doing it either too fast or something would happen. And
they weren't using the correct tank.
No, it sounds like they were using the exact same process someone at Dunkin' Donuts uses to fill up the iced coffee.
Yeah. And except it was like, Ouchie woke up everyone and he was like, oh, time to make the radiation. Like, instead of time to make the donuts.
Right.
But he was the guy who was literally holding the funnel.
Yeah.
That the stuff was going towards. He was up against the tank.
And so it's dropping all out of the funnel, getting all over his hands.
What happened is that the mixture went critical. Basically, they were sitting and watching, and they said a blue flash just went like, and they're just like, oh no, is that firework? And then they started feeling sick. They started feeling like immediately nauseous and disoriented.
Yeah, they looked fine, but they were what happened is that they had been bombarded by neutron beams.
Ooh, cool.
Which is actually the most powerful form of radioactive energy. So these guys were immediately fucked.
They were microwaved.
Yeah, they were microwaved essentially. And they looked fine. They started feeling sick immediately.
Hisashi's skin, because the problem is he was right up against the thing.
Yeah.
He was right up against the thing. So the rest of them looked fine. They died literally a month later.
Yeah.
Hisashi, his skin was literally burnt off of his body.
Yeah.
Just on the front half of him.
He didn't get powers like Powder did? He wasn't able to control electricity or anything like that?
I mean, I imagine his first thing was like, so, do I become Godzilla now?
Right.
Or something, is this cool? Is this good? Am I Spider-Man?
I also feel like he sounds a little bit like Cartman.
Yes.
So he was exposed to a radiation dose of about 20 sieverts.
And how many do you want?
None.
Zero.
Yeah, zero
Okay.
You're looking
sieverts.
for zero.
Yeah.
Okay.
The mortality rate, to put this into perspective, I mean, I don't have time to go into what sieverts are.
Right.
I know what they are. Of course I know what they are.
Man.
But I don't have time to go into it right now.
Everybody knows that, Marcus.
Yeah.
We talk about it all the time off of the air.
Yeah. That's all I talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's my pet knowledge.
You don't have to tell me. If I hear one more damn thing about these sieverts and all the information you know about them.
Piss my pants.
Oh, God, we know all of the information you know already, and it's a lot.
I know.
Good Lord.
So the mortality rate for patients exposed to levels exceeding 8 sieverts is 100%. So
he got 20, so it's like 90 million %. So he just basically turned into soup.
Yeah. There's no way that this guy's surviving. He has a 100% mortality rate. But they say how his body looked. They say at first glance his body was bright red, like he'd been scalded with water.
That is kind of cool. So far, so good.
Yeah.
Is that cool?
Yeah, it's a little bit cool.
Like you want to be cherry red on the outside? You want to look like a firebird? I don't think so.
If it didn't hurt like a whole bunch, yeah, it would be kind of awesome. And then it would be like, hey, kids, is it dark in here? Not anymore because I'm full of light, you know?
So no skin remained on his front side. It had just sloughed off. And you know how much I love an opportunity to say sloughed off.
Yeah.
But yeah.
For a while they were laughing because they was like, it's like we could take his face and make it into a pizza. Oh, flipping in the air. Oh no, it's all prego.
That is kind of a funny thing to do.
Seriously hurt.
Yeah. That's sad. That's sad there at the end there, yeah.
However, his entire backside, the skin was completely normal. It was only his front side that was so fucked up at first. However, the intestines, once they opened him up, the intestines were swollen, and they said that it looked like a writhing serpent. Yeah.
So what do you mean? So it was just shaking around, moving?
They were literally going like seizing because his gastrointestines weren't functioning. They were literally full of shit and seizing because he wasn't doing well.
Right. Looking like the snakes.
Basically, it destroyed his DNA.
It rearranged
in his body.
It rearranged his chromosomes.
So if you're going to commit murder and you don't want your DNA to be found at the scene, just stand next to a nuclear thing.
But like every mucous membrane, every
20,000
mucous membrane in
sieverts.
his body it disappeared, which means his eyeballs, his nose, inside of his nose, he was all fucked up.
Was he alive?
Yes.
Well, this is the thing: is they thought he was dead when it first happened. They thought that he was like, well, his brain is fried, he's gone.
Right.
It was 7 days in. Apparently, he was like laying there, and then finally opened his eyes, and he was like, "I am not your guinea pig. Please let me die." And they were like basically keeping him alive, looking at his organs and shit, but he was totally conscious.
Yeah.
And then he was hanging around laughing. And they said they would laugh and joke and they would do all this stuff. Meanwhile, he's sitting there like the picture of him. He looks like David Cross from the Mr. Show sketch with when he jumps into the vat of acid to commit suicide. Like straight, I'm gonna put it on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
He
pretty
looks like
intense.
kimchi, and not in the delicious kind.
No, he's a little cooked, a little overcooked.
He's a sausage man.
Yeah.
To be sure. And keeping it alive, they kept him alive for way longer than was even close to being ethical. On the 59th day, he died, and they resuscitated him.
Oh yeah, and because
That's amazing.
every time they bring him back 3 times, every time they brought him back to life, he died. And they
So-
brought him back to life, and he died because basically the government was using this to learn what happens when you get 20 sieverts of radiation.
And
to the body.
like any government medical test, it always just ends with the report being like, really sucked for him. Yeah. They hated it.
I'll tell you what, he never went cool. You know what I mean? I think at some point we thought maybe he turned into some sort of like cool werewolf, like in Teen Wolf, or like he would become like the Hulk or like the Thing or something. But in the end, he just turned into human soup. So
I even sewed some hair onto him, just thinking maybe that would like start a growth thing. Nothing.
I put a fun wig on him, and I put some fake teeth, like chatter teeth, in there because I thought that would be funny. But instead, it was terrifying.
I mean,
Ghoulish, I would say.
a little funny though.
Here's the strange thing about it, though. The only one of his internal organs that did not, atrophy and turn in on itself and eventually, fall apart, his heart. And
Look at
That's bad
that.
luck.
It's just like my football coach said. The strongest muscle of the body really is the heart.
It really is. Yeah, you can take 20 sieverts of nuclear energy and everything will fall apart except for the only organ that keeps you alive. The only one that you wish would stop working.
Yeah. He died. His entire body was destroyed from the inside out, and it was a slow, painful, and unpreventable death.
And it's rough out there for people. We're bad. Humans are bad.
Yeah.
And they gotta go.
This powder like exploded, almost like gunpowder would, while they were dumping it in there. It was like this weird blue powder that a flash of a camera or something. And apparently the two guys that were mixing it in there, like the whole front of both of their bodies were burnt. And burnt in like a radioactive way, where like at first their skin turned red, like it looked like 2nd-degree burns, but then over eyes melted shut and stuff. And then they found out that they were using this stuff all throughout the town, just because after they were doing experiment after experiment with this stuff, when it wasn't working out, they were pretty much dumping the byproduct. The story is really weird, because if you try to look up what the name of the corporation was that was doing these experiments to try and make this like sort of nuclear-driven engine device, this fission, fusion, whatever it is, I can't find the name of it. Everywhere I've checked it out, they've either blacked it out, or they've said they can't list it for uses of slander or libel. That they settled out of court with a lot of the families, but in turn they weren't allowed to say the name of the company or expose who was connected to the company for sake of libel and slander, which the laws in Japan are actually pretty strict. So apparently around this area was where the corporation used to have its main plant, and that's what I want to try and find now.
Once again, as I got close to this place, I was yelled at. I was told kaede, and kaede means go home. Not in the sense of go home to your house in Osaka, where I live in Japan, but go home to the country you came from. Some people aren't too happy I'm out here. Let's see how close I can get to this little area without getting in too much trouble. Hopefully I can check out a little bit more and give you guys a bit more details on this place, which apparently flooded the whole irrigation system here with chemicals. So we're pretty much locked out here. I'm not going to try and climb any fences or anything to get in there. But I sure would like to see what this place is exactly. You can see all kinds of chemical containers in there. Maybe I probably even shouldn't get close to this place to begin with. So across from the big factory here, if we look up, You can see it's an entire apartment complex across from it, covered in that same stuff. And there's no supply trucks that are there to actually fix up the building. It's just quarantined off, like no one can get into it. There's a giant net over it. It's really weird. And it's right across from the corporation I just showed you that was shut down ages ago for all the chemicals. Here we go, massive area. Oh wow. I can still hear machines running in there. It will still be going. Alright. Cops are pulling up here, so I need to go. Found one way to get in there, but as soon as I got really close to entering into the place, the cops showed up, and they didn't come up to me and say anything yet, but they were pretty much following me as I'm recording this even. You know, I'm sure I look a little bit suspicious, not really welcomed here. That's okay. I'm on my way, I'm headed home, but that doesn't mean I'll pick up a little bit of more video before I go.
Hey, you hear that? It's that siren again. Same kind of siren I heard when I was in Inunaki. Almost exactly identical in its sound. So I got as far away as I could from the factory area that I wanted to show you. I took a quick dip into here, and once again I find myself in an abandoned playground. Look at this place, totally rusted out. Unsafe equipment for children. Must be a theme running through abandoned towns in Japan. The first thing that gets washed out and looking post-apocalyptic is the playgrounds. Anyway, that siren's starting to go off louder and louder now. And I'm starting to hear it closer, and apparently when the siren goes off in this part of the village, apparently what it has to do with is the fact that when there's a visitor in the village, which I guess I might be the only visitor, that they sound the siren when the people who are deformed are coming out of their house, because it's to warn you to turn away or not look, because apparently they're horribly disformed. I find that very hard to believe. It almost makes me want to stay around and not go back to find my train and see if this is true. Nonetheless, at the same time, like I said, when I was at that factory, the cops had just pulled up. I don't think I've really gained a lot of trust with being close to that, so maybe it should be better if I do head back. Nonetheless, if I do see something along the way, I'll try to videotape it. Okay, now the town's not getting to be so friendly anymore. I'm starting to get yelled at by other parts of the town. Other houses, people shouting out windows and stuff. All I see is kind of like blurred people through like bubble glass windows. The sirens are getting louder and louder as I get to this part of the town. I'm just gonna try and either get to the next town over and jump into a taxi and get over to the train station, or something else like that. I'm kind of starting to feel my nerves get on edge here. Okay, so I've hidden out a small little gap here between places, in between a little building that has actual shops, and I'm gonna try and jump over to the other town, and it's only a couple meters out here. And what I'll do from there is actually finally be out of this place. It's a shame I didn't actually get to meet or interview anybody. Would have been interesting to actually get to see somebody in this town up close and personal, but for the most part I get kind of a really aggressive feeling of me not needing to be here, and I think I'll answer that by leaving now. Okay, so we're finally crossing over into the bridge that actually leads me into the next prefecture. The good thing about Japan is that things are within walking distance. It's not like my own country where you gotta go miles and miles to get yourself back out of a state. Little tiny wards can be super small here, and now I've gotten myself into the next ward over, which already seems to have a lot more life. I can see newly built buildings, people riding around on bikes, and just things like people walking their dogs and stuff like that behind me. I'm gonna jump into a taxi from here and head back to a train station that I'm gonna actually take from a station within this town and not the one I arrived on. But what I can say today is that as I started to leave and the sirens kept going, more and more shouts started to come from me, from different windows and different, I guess, areas I thought were vacant, areas I thought were abandoned, but apparently were still either being lived in or squatted in at least. It's a pretty strange atmosphere there. Again, sorry I couldn't get any interviews with anybody there. Of course, I don't have any contacts in these areas, and trying to find anyone who will actually interview with you or talk to you about these areas is hard, because oftentimes, like I've said before in the past, Japan sweeps a lot of stuff under the rug when it comes to any kind of dirty corporation or politics that goes down. And that being said, I hope you enjoyed what you saw here today. I don't really have any plans of coming back to Tanibusu. Any places that you find in the future like this, as this place was actually researched and found by a viewer, I'll be happy to go and check it out. That being said, I'm Unrested. This is Osoroshii Saturday, and have a good one.